Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are diving into the powerful and transformative ideas presented in Tiny Habits, the Small Changes That Change Everything by BJ Fogg, PhD. This book is a groundbreaking guide that offers a fresh perspective on building habits by starting small, staying consistent, and making the process enjoyable. Rather than relying on willpower or motivation, BJ Fogg teaches a system grounded in behavior science that focuses on design and simplicity. His philosophy is that success in creating lasting habits lies in making them so small and so easy that failure becomes almost impossible. BJ Fogg begins the book by dismantling a widespread myth about behavior change, the idea that change must be hard, or that transformation requires major overhauls in our lives. He argues that the common approach of setting ambitious goals and pushing oneself to the limits often leads to burnout, frustration, and failure. Instead, Fogg introduces a radically different concept, that habits, even those that seem minor or insignificant, can accumulate into powerful forces that shape our identity, success, and well-being. The essence of his theory is that lasting change does not happen through grand gestures but through the consistent application of small actions. At the core of his method is the understanding of how behavior actually works. Fogg's behavior model breaks behavior down into three essential components: motivation, ability, and prompts. For a behavior to happen, these three elements must converge at the same moment. If any one of them is missing, the behavior won't occur. However, unlike most systems that overemphasize motivation, Fogg shifts the attention to ability and prompts. He reveals that motivation is unreliable, fleeting, and difficult to control, whereas ability and prompts can be designed and adjusted with greater ease and predictability. To make behaviors more likely to occur, Fogg emphasizes designing habits that are incredibly easy to do. He suggests that the smaller the habit, the less motivation you need to do it. This is a game changer because it allows people to take action even when motivation is low. The idea is that by shrinking habits down to a size that feels effortless, you remove the mental and emotional barriers that often prevent action. This approach not only increases the chance of success but also creates a positive emotional association with the habit itself, making it more likely to stick. One of the most profound aspects of Fogg's method is the role of celebration. He encourages readers to create a positive emotional reaction immediately after completing a habit, no matter how small it is. This emotion, he explains, helps to wire the new behavior into the brain. The human brain responds strongly to emotions, and when a behavior is paired with a feeling of success or pride, it becomes more memorable and more likely to be repeated. In this way, celebration becomes a vital part of habit formation, not as a reward for big achievements, but as a reinforcement for showing up and doing even the smallest action. Fogg also addresses the concept of identity and how habits contribute to who we believe we are. He explains that identity is shaped not by massive accomplishments, but by small, consistent actions that confirm and reinforce how we see ourselves. Each tiny habit becomes a vote for the kind of person we want to be. This approach removes the pressure of perfection and replaces it with progress. By focusing on identity, people can create habits that align with their values and aspirations, building a sense of integrity and confidence as they go. Throughout the beginning of the book, BJ Fogg encourages readers to think like designers rather than judges. Instead of blaming themselves for not having enough discipline, he invites them to take a playful, experimental approach. When something doesn't work, it's not a personal failure, it's just a signal that the system needs to be adjusted. This mindset shift is empowering, as it turns habit formation into a creative process, one where curiosity, flexibility, and self-compassion are key tools for growth. Fogg also introduces the importance of anchoring new habits to existing routines. This technique, known as anchoring, involves identifying a reliable behavior you already do each day and using it as a cue for your new habit. This connection increases the likelihood that the habit will be remembered and performed consistently. By tying new actions to familiar patterns, people create natural triggers that eliminate the need for reminders or high motivation. The beginning of Tiny Habits lays the foundation for a method that is both scientifically grounded and human-centered. It offers an antidote to the guilt and shame that often accompany failed attempts at change and replaces them with simplicity, flexibility, and joy. BJ Fogg's message is clear: the secret to transforming your life isn't found in extraordinary effort, but in making small, deliberate choices that are easy to repeat and deeply satisfying. At the core of his approach is the belief that behavior is not driven solely by motivation or willpower but is a product of design. Fogg emphasizes that human behavior follows a predictable pattern. For a behavior to happen, three elements must converge at the same moment: motivation, ability, and a prompt. If any one of these is missing, the behavior will not occur. Motivation, while often praised, is actually the most unreliable factor. It fluctuates constantly depending on mood, environment, stress, and many other factors. Because of this inconsistency, Fogg recommends not relying on motivation to establish new habits. Instead, he places a strong emphasis on ability. When something is easy to do, we're more likely to do it regardless of how motivated we feel. That's why he advises scaling down behaviors to the tiniest possible version, so tiny they don't require effort or high levels of motivation. Another important concept in Fogg's method is the prompt. A prompt is what reminds you to do a behavior. It's the cue that triggers the action. Rather than using alarms or sticky notes, Fogg suggests anchoring new habits to existing routines. These anchors are behaviors you already do each day without fail, like brushing your teeth, putting on your shoes, or making coffee. By attaching a tiny habit to one of these anchors, you create a reliable trigger that will remind you to perform your new behavior naturally, without the need for external reminders. What sets this method apart is its focus on ease and immediacy. Fogg insists that a new habit should take less than 30 seconds to complete and should not feel like a chore. When the habit feels easy and is tied to something you already do, it becomes almost inevitable. You don't need to summon willpower or wait for the perfect moment, you just do it. And because the behavior is so small, there's virtually no resistance. Fogg also introduces a powerful reinforcement technique, celebrating immediately after doing the tiny habit. This could be a fist pump, a smile, or even silently saying yes. This moment of celebration creates a positive emotional association with the behavior, which is crucial in making it stick. Your brain links the action with a feeling of success, increasing the likelihood that you'll do it again. Over time, this positive feedback loop builds confidence and reinforces the identity of someone who follows through and makes progress. This identity shift is subtle but powerful. Each time you perform your tiny habit, you're casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. Eventually, these votes accumulate and reshape how you see yourself. Instead of trying to force change through discipline, you're gradually becoming someone who naturally acts in alignment with your goals. This internal transformation supports sustainable change without pressure or guilt. Fogg emphasizes that growth should feel good. The idea is not to shame yourself into action but to feel successful with every small step. When success feels good, you're more likely to continue. This approach contrasts sharply with traditional models that push people to aim high from the start, often leading to burnout and failure. By starting small and feeling good from the beginning, you create momentum that propels you forward. He also encourages flexibility. If you miss a habit, you don't need to feel bad or give up. You simply get back to it the next time. There's no punishment, no guilt, just gentle, consistent effort. This mindset shift helps eliminate the all-or-nothing thinking that derails so many attempts at habit change. Another key insight from Fogg is that you don't need to break bad habits before you build good ones. Instead of fighting against old behaviors, you simply focus on creating new, positive behaviors that naturally begin to crowd out the negative ones. This strategy is more effective and much less stressful than trying to eliminate bad habits through sheer force of will. Fogg's method is especially useful because it's adaptable. You can apply it to any area of life: health, productivity, relationships, or personal growth. It's not about changing everything at once, it's about making one tiny improvement at a time, each one building on the last. By designing behavior that fits who you are and where you are in life, you increase the chance of success. Fogg emphasizes that you are not the problem, your system is. If you're not making progress, it's not because you lack discipline or strength, it's because the behavior isn't designed correctly. With the right design, success becomes effortless. The brilliance of this method lies in its simplicity. You start small, you anchor the habit to something familiar, you celebrate immediately, and you let those small wins accumulate. Over time, they snowball into lasting change, not through willpower or struggle, but through consistency and joy. According to Fogg, emotions, not repetition or time, are what create lasting habits. The traditional belief is that habits form after 21 or 30 days of repetition. But Fogg challenges this assumption by pointing out that repetition alone doesn't guarantee habit formation. Instead, the feeling you experience during and after a behavior determines whether your brain considers it worth remembering and repeating. Fogg's research shows that when a behavior makes you feel successful, your brain takes note. That emotional high acts like a glue, bonding the behavior to your identity. This is why celebration is so crucial in the tiny habits method. It doesn't just reward you, it literally changes your brain, helping lock in the new pattern. Even if the habit is tiny, if it's paired with a strong positive emotion, it becomes meaningful and memorable. He explains that you can even rewire how you feel about yourself through these moments of success. When you consistently perform habits that make you feel good, you start believing in your ability to change. This belief becomes self-fulfilling. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who struggles with consistency, you begin to identify as someone who follows through and succeeds. This shift in identity lays the foundation for more ambitious behavior changes later on. Another critical idea in the book is what Fogg calls the anchor and shine technique. Anchoring refers to the process of finding the right place in your daily routine to attach a new habit. The anchor must be something solid, something that happens consistently. Once the new habit is attached, you allow it to shine by adding celebration and emotion. This makes the habit feel rewarding and natural, and it helps ensure that it becomes automatic over time. Fogg also encourages readers to design habits around their actual lives, not their ideal versions. He warns against creating habits that only work under perfect conditions. Instead, the goal is to create habits that function even on your busiest or most stressful days. That's why starting tiny is so effective. These habits are so small and quick that they can happen no matter what's going on in your life. The book highlights that flexibility and personalization are key. There's no one-size-fits-all model. What works for one person may not work for another. That's why Fogg recommends experimenting and adjusting your habits as you go. You might find that one anchor doesn't work well for you, or that a particular celebration doesn't make you feel successful. That's perfectly okay. The method encourages you to adapt and refine until it fits you comfortably. Fogg also addresses a common trap in behavior change, trying to do too much at once. When people attempt to overhaul their lives in one go, they often burn out. They might feel motivated at first, but when that motivation fades, the system collapses. The tiny habits method is deliberately designed to avoid this pitfall. By focusing on small wins, you stay in motion without exhausting yourself. Progress in this model isn't about intensity. It's about consistency. One tiny step repeated over time leads to meaningful change. This is counterintuitive in a culture that celebrates big, dramatic transformations. But Fogg's research shows that long-term success is built on the back of small, reliable actions. He also stresses that habits are not moral judgments. You are not a better or worse person based on your ability to maintain a habit. This perspective removes the shame and guilt often associated with failed attempts at change. In the tiny habits model, failure is just feedback, it's a signal to redesign, not a reason to quit. An important distinction Fogg makes is that you don't have to force yourself to do anything. When you design habits that are enjoyable, easy, and naturally fit into your life, you won't need to rely on willpower. They will happen because they're designed to happen. This approach respects your energy and mental bandwidth, which are limited resources. By working with yourself, not against yourself, you create a system where habits feel like a natural part of who you are. Another profound point Fogg makes is that tiny habits can grow. You might start with a habit so small it seems almost trivial. But once it's established, it often grows on its own. You may feel inspired to do more without even trying. That's the beauty of starting small. It lowers the barrier to entry but opens the door to much bigger change. This natural growth happens because success feels good, and when something feels good, you want more of it. Fogg's method also helps you feel in control. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment or the right mood, you take action today, with what you have. That sense of agency builds confidence and momentum. Over time, this turns into a lifestyle, one that supports your goals, values, and overall well-being. Through this method, change is no longer something to fear or dread. It becomes approachable, even enjoyable. You gain a sense of power, not because you're forcing yourself to be different, but because you've learned how to design behavior that fits you. The result is a steady transformation that doesn't burn out or backfire. It becomes part of who you are. BJ Fogg explains that success with habits doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency. And the best way to stay consistent is to make success feel easy. When something feels easy, we're more likely to repeat it. That's why tiny habits aren't about doing more. They're about lowering the bar so far that doing the habit feels almost effortless. He reinforces that motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, depending on mood, energy, or circumstances. If you rely on motivation to do something, you'll eventually hit a day where it's just not there. But if the habit is tiny, so tiny that you can do it no matter how you feel, you'll be able to stay on track. One powerful insight he shares is that emotions, not repetition, create habits. If you feel good immediately after doing something, your brain remembers that. This is how habits form quickly and strongly. Even a small smile, a positive word, or a gesture of pride helps lock in the behavior. Feeling successful in the moment is what makes the habit last. Fogg also debunks the myth that it takes 21 or 30 days to form a habit. The truth is, habits don't form on a strict timeline, they form based on how strongly your brain connects a behavior with a positive feeling and a reliable trigger. So rather than focusing on how long it takes, he encourages focusing on how good it feels, and how well it fits into your day. By now, the message is clear: the smaller the action, the greater the chance it will stick. And when it sticks, it grows. You're not forcing change. You're creating space for it, letting it take root through positive reinforcement and smart design. Fogg introduces the idea of success momentum. When you experience a win, no matter how small, it energizes you. That energy spills into other areas of life. You might start with a tiny habit like putting away one dish, and without even planning to, you tidy the whole kitchen. Not because you had to, but because success feels good, and good feelings lead to more action. That's why celebrating even the smallest wins is so important. It turns a simple behavior into a moment of pride. And over time, those moments stack up, creating a new version of yourself in your own mind. You start to see yourself as capable, as someone who follows through. Your identity shifts from someone trying to change to someone who does these things naturally. The book makes it clear that habit formation is a design problem, not a character problem. If something isn't working, it's not because you're weak or lazy, it's because the habit wasn't designed well for your life. Fogg encourages a mindset of experimentation. Try, tweak, adjust. When you remove judgment, you make room for progress. He also highlights that the most powerful habits often aren't the ones we think of first. A tiny habit of deep breathing, of pausing, of saying something kind to yourself, these shape your emotions and focus, making everything else easier. The internal habits matter just as much as the outward ones. As Fogg moves toward the heart of lasting change, he focuses more on how habits can lead to transformation, not by forcing radical change overnight, but by allowing small wins to accumulate into powerful personal shifts. What begins as a tiny action becomes the foundation for a new identity. You start to believe, not just hope, that you can change. He describes how successful habit formation builds self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence your own behavior and outcomes. Each time you do a habit, no matter how small, you prove to yourself that you're in control. That belief is the real power behind long-term change. It's not the habit itself that changes your life, but what it represents, proof that you're capable of doing what you set out to do. Fogg also shares that it's not about doing everything perfectly or even doing your habit every single day. What matters is staying connected to the process. If you miss a day, it's okay. You haven't failed. You simply continue. In the tiny habits model, there's no failure, only adjustments. The system is built to bend, not break. In the final stretch of the book, he ties everything together. Habits don't require motivation when they are designed to be tiny, anchored to reliable cues, and celebrated with emotion. Over time, those simple ingredients combine to create powerful, lasting change. BJ Fogg concludes his book by encouraging readers to trust the simplicity of the method. The core of tiny habits isn't about willpower or self-discipline. It's about working with the natural structure of human behavior, not against it. By respecting how behavior really works, through emotion, environment, and consistency, we can create meaningful change without overwhelm or burnout. One of the final ideas he shares is the ripple effect of habit change. When you master one tiny habit, it often leads to others, sometimes without planning it. This organic expansion happens because you've proven to yourself that change is possible. The emotional success from one behavior fuels the confidence to try another. And since the habits are small and easy, the process continues to unfold naturally, like a chain reaction. Fogg reminds readers that life is always changing. What works now might need adjusting later, and that's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's adaptability. With the Tiny Habits framework, you can keep adjusting your habits to fit your evolving routines and needs. It becomes a life skill, not just a one-time change strategy. He ends with a deep sense of optimism. Lasting change is not only possible, it can be joyful, easy, and sustainable. The key is to start tiny, anchor to what already works, celebrate success, and allow growth to unfold at its own pace. When you do, transformation becomes a natural extension of who you are, not something you force, but something you gently grow into.